Welcome back, my students. Dr. Oogway here, and today I bring you the lecture on tracts of spinal cord. Clearly, very important topic for your university examinations. So let's begin. Tracts. What do you mean by a tract? What do you mean by a tract? Tract is a collection of nerve fibers. Is a collection of nerve fibers. Clearly, that connects that connects two masses of gray matter in central nervous system. Two masses of gray matter in central nervous system. Consider this a gray matter. Consider this another gray matter. Clearly, in central nervous system, these two gray matters are connected by a collection of nerve fibers. This collection of nerve fibers is known as tract. Now the question arises, what do you mean by gray matter? What do you mean by gray matter? We know what is central nervous system. It's made up of neurons. If we look at individual neuron, it has an cell body. It has an axon. Clearly, this collection of cell body in central nervous system is known as gray matter. So tract is a collection of nerve fibers that connects two masses of gray matter in central nervous system. Moving forward. These tracts are of two types. Ascending tracts and descending tracts. Descending tracts. Ascending tracts, as the name suggests, go towards the brain, from spinal cord towards the brain, down to top, while as descending tracts start from the brain and go down. So descending tracts are top to bottom tracts, and ascending tracts are bottom to top tracts. Clearly, they go up, ascending, and descending, they go down. They go down. Clearly, these descending tracts are further of two types. Those are pyramidal tracts and extra pyramidal tracts. Clearly, this lecture in this lecture we will study pyramidal tracts. In the next lecture we will study extrapyramidal tracts that will complete the descending tracts, and in the next lecture we will study the ascending tracts, and that will complete the tracts of spinal cord. Clearly, that will complete the tracts of spinal cord. So tracts can be ascending and descending can be pyramidal or extra pyramidal. So let's begin with pyramidal tracts. Pyramidal tracts are also known as corticospinal tracts. Clearly, corticospinal tracts. Number first point. Another point, its function. What is the function of the pyramidal system? What is the function of the pyramidal tract? They initiation of fine skilled distal voluntary movements. So the function of the pyramidal tract is initiation of fine cycled distal voluntary movements, like writing. Clearly, this pyramidal tract has two parts. Those parts are the and anterior lateral and anterior. This lateral part is known as lateral corticospinal tract, because pyramidal tract is also known as corticospinal tract, and this anterior part is known as anterior corticospinal tract. We will talk about both of these parts. We will talk about these two parts in coming minutes. Clearly, another point in pyramidal tract, it has an upper motor neuron and a lower motor neuron. Clearly, this upper motor neuron is located in cortex, and this lower motor neuron is in spinal cord. Therefore the name corticospinal tract. So these are the 4 pointers, 1 2 3 4 points in the pyramidal tract. Clearly, now we will talk about its course. Now we will talk about the course of the pyramidal tract. As we know, it is a descending tract. It starts in the cortex and goes down. So let's begin. So first we will talk about its origin. since it's a descending tract, it must originate in the cortex. It must originate in the cortex. It originates in cerebrum. It originates in cerebral cortex. It originates in cerebral cortex. Clearly, cerebral cortex has many areas. We have divided the cerebral cortex in many areas for our convenience. That we will study in the separate lecture, in the lecture of the cerebrum. Among those areas, we have area 4, we have area 6, we have area 4, 3, 1 and 2. 3, 1 and 2. This area 4 is also known as primary motor area. Clearly, this area 6 is known as premotor area, and this area 312 is known as primary sensory area. Primary sensory area. Clearly, from this area 4, 30% of fibers come. From this area 6, 30% of fibers originate, and from area 312, 40% of fibers originate. As we know, tracts are the collection of fibers. So 30% fibers from here, 30% of fibers from area 6 of the cerebral cortex, and 40% of fibers from area 312 of the cerebral cortex. So this is the origin, top to down. So this is the origin at the top. Now it goes down. It goes down. I will draw the diagram as well. You know, that's given in the BDC. We'll look at it in coming minutes clearly. So this is the cerebral cortex. So this is the cerebral cortex. So this is the area 6, this is the area 4, and this is the area 3, 1 and 2 clearly. So 30% of fibers from area 6, 30% of area fibers from area 4, and 40% of fibers from area 3, 1 and 2 clearly. So this is the origin. So after the origin from these parts, area 4, area 6 and area 312, the corticospinal tract goes to the internal capsule, goes to the internal capsule, goes to the internal capsule. Below the cerebrum, there is a structure in the brain that's called as the internal capsule. We will study this internal capsule in detail in its separate lecture clearly. So for time being, remember, now the fibers go to the internal capsule. Now the fibers go to the internal capsule. So this is the internal capsule. This is the internal capsule. Internal capsule. And the fibers go through the internal capsule clearly. This internal capsule has many parts. This internal capsule has many parts. These fibers go through a particular part of the internal capsule that's called as the anterior limb of the that's called as the posterior limb of the internal capsule. This internal capsule has many parts. It has anterior limb, it has posterior limb, it has genu clearly. But the corticospinal tract go through the posterior limb of internal capsule. Posterior limb of internal capsule. So the corticospinal tract originates in the cerebral cortex from these areas, then go to the internal capsule, then go through the posterior limb of internal capsule clearly. Now from internal capsule, fibers go to the midbrain. Fibers go to the midbrain. Midbrain. We know brain stem. Brain stem. Brain stem has three parts. We have midbrain, then we have pons, then we have medulla. Then we have medulla. Clearly. Now, after coming out of the internal capsule, posterior limb of internal capsule, fibers go to the midbrain, then they will go to pons, then they will go to medulla, then they will go to medulla. Okay. So I will draw the midbrain. I will draw the midbrain. So cortex, then internal capsule, posterior limb, then so this is the posterior limb of internal capsule. Fibers go through the posterior limb of internal capsule. Now I will draw the medulla. Now I will draw the midbrain. So this is the midbrain. So this is the midbrain. Now fibers go to the midbrain. Now fibers go to the midbrain. This is the midbrain. Midbrain. And this part of the midbrain is called as the crus cerebri. Crus cerebri. Crus cerebri. Clearly. Now from the midbrain, the fibers go to the pons. Now fibers go to the pons. Corticospinal tract goes to the pons. Now I will draw the pons. Now I will draw the pons. So this is the pons. Now the fibers from the midbrain goes to the pons, goes to the Pons. So what is this? This is pons. Which part of the pons? This is the basilar part of the pons. Basilar part of pons. Basilar part of pons. Clearly? So from cortex to the posterior limb of internal capsule to the midbrain to the pons, basilar part of pons to the, now from pons they go to the medulla oblongata. Clearly? So now I will draw medulla. Now I will draw medulla. So this is the medulla. Clearly? So from the pons, basilar part of the pons, fibers go to the medulla. What is this part? Pyramid. Therefore, pyramidal tract. Pyramid to the pyramid of the medulla. Pyramid of the medulla. Clearly? So now moving forward. I will draw the medulla again. Now first I will revise some fibers originate in cortex, then go to the posterior limb of internal capsule. Clearly? Then go to the midbrain, then go to the pons, then go to the medulla, below the medulla, in brain, medulla continues the spinal cord, then after the medulla, fibers go to the spinal cord. Therefore corticospinal tract. Now I will draw the medulla first. Clearly? So fibers come, they go to the pyramid of the medulla, and then they go to the spinal cord. Now I will draw a spinal cord. So this is the spinal cord. In the spinal cord, I will draw its gray matter. So what is the shaded portion in the spinal cord? So the shaded portion in the spinal cord is gray matter. So this is the gray matter, and this is the white matter. Clearly? So this is the spinal cord. Clearly? From the lower part of the medulla, so from this pyramid, from the lower part of the medulla, 80% of fibers move to the opposite side. Clearly? So they are on the right side. So 80% of fibers move to the opposite side. Clearly? How many percent of fibers? 80% of fibers. While as 20% of fibers remain on the same side. Clearly? 20% of fibers. Clearly? This moving of 80% of fibers from one side to the another side is called a pyramidal decussation. Is known as pyramidal decussation. Clearly? This pyramidal decussation. These 80% of fibers move to this part. This part is lateral white column of spinal cord. So the 80% of fibers move from the lower part of the medulla to the lateral white column of the spinal cord of the opposite side. This is of the same side, this is of the opposite side. So this pathway is known as lateral corticospinal tract. Now the 80% of fibers move to the opposite side, but 20% of fibers remain on the same side, and goes to this part. This part is known as anterior white column of spinal cord. So these 20% of fibers are known as anterior corticospinal tract. The thing I talked about, that corticospinal tract has two parts, this lateral corticospinal tract and anterior corticospinal tract. This was I talking about. 80% of fibers move to the lateral white column of spinal cord, they form the lateral corticospinal tract. 20% of fibers move on the same side but goes not to the anterior, not but they do not go to the lateral white column of the same side, they go to the anterior white column of the same side. Clearly? So from the anterior corticospinal tract, this is the anterior white column of the opposite side. Clearly? Now moving forward, these 80% of fibers from lateral white column of spinal cord goes to the gray matter. This is the gray matter. This is known as anterior horn. This is the anterior horn of the opposite side. This is the posterior horn. This is the posterior horn of the opposite side. One half, another half. This half anterior horn, posterior horn. This half anterior horn, posterior horn. clearly. So these 80% of fibers from lateral white column of spinal cord go to the anterior horn of the gray matter. This is the anterior horn of the gray matter, clearly, of the same side. So from lateral white column of spinal cord, fibers go to the anterior gray matter, anterior horn of gray matter of same side. Clearly, clearly. From anterior white column, from here, fibers also go to the anterior horn of the gray matter, anterior horn of the gray matter, but of the opposite side. Because from this side they go to this side, from the right side they go to the left side. Clearly, this is also the anterior horn of the spinal cord. Clearly, anterior horn of the spinal cord. They do not go to the anterior horn of the same side. They go to the anterior horn of the opposite side. They go to the anterior horn of the opposite side. So lateral corticospinal tract go to the anterior horn, but of the same side. But anterior white column of spinal cord, anterior corticospinal tract does not go to the anterior horn of the same side. They go to the anterior horn of the opposite side. Clearly, so I can say decussation is 100%. Decussation is 100%. Is 100%. How? 80% is in medulla. 80% in medulla. As you can see here, 80% is in medulla. Decussation meaning crossing, while as 20% in spinal cord. Here is the rest of the 20%. 20% in spinal cord, 20% in spinal cord. So the decussation is 100% in corticospinal tract. Corticospinal tract. Both the lateral corticospinal tract and anterior corticospinal tract go to the anterior horn of the gray matter. Anterior horn of the gray matter. Clearly? So this part is clear. This part is clear. Another point. Do you remember we talked about upper motor neuron and lower motor neuron? And lower motor neuron. Fibers originate in the cortex, and they go down through the different parts that we talked about, and the fibers reach to the anterior horn of the gray matter. Anterior horn of the gray matter. Fibers up to the anterior horn of the gray matter are called as the upper motor neuron. Clearly, all the fibers up to anterior horn cells, anterior horn of gray matter, anterior horn of gray matter of spinal cord is called upper motor neuron. And what is this lower motor neuron? All the fibers, fibers, all the fibers arising from anterior horn, in, and including including anterior horn, anterior horn fibers. So up to the anterior horn, all the fibers from cortex go to the anterior horn. Those fibers up to the anterior horn form the upper motor neurons, and the fibers of the anterior horn and the fibers coming out of it are called as the lower motor neuron. Clearly, so far is clear. So from medulla they go to the spinal cord. Then they supply the distal voluntary movements. Clearly. Now, another point, last 2 points. Clearly, if there is a lesion, if there is a last point in the spinal cord, but before we talk about these 2 points, we will look the diagram of the corticospinal tract in the BDC. As you can see, the fibers originate in the motor cortex area 46312. Then they go to the internal capsule, posterior limb of internal capsule. Then they go to the midbrain, crux cerebri of the midbrain. Clearly, then go to the basilar part of the pons. Then they go to the pyramid, clearly middle oblongata pyramid. Then 80% of fibers move to the lateral white column of the spinal cord, while as 20% of fibers remain on the same side and go to the anterior corticospinal tract. Clearly, go to the anterior white column. Both of these fibers here and here, they go to the anterior horn cells. But for lateral corticospinal cord, they go to the same anterior horn, and for the anterior corticospinal tract, they go to the opposite anterior horn. Clearly, not to this horn. Clearly, and then the lower motor neurons come out. This is the course of the corticospinal tract. One last point that we should know about, if there is a lesion, If there is a lesion in brainstem, in brain stem, above decussation, above pyramidal decussation, above pyramidal decussation. Clearly, there will be contralateral weakness. Contralateral weakness. What do you mean by contralateral weakness? Contralateral weakness means on the opposite sides. On the opposite sides. If there is a lesion in the middle, if there is a lesion in above, here is the pyramidal decussation. The lesion is above the pyramidal decussation. Clearly, so weakness will be on the opposite side because it supplies the 80% of fibers go to the opposite sides. Actually, all of the fibers go to the opposite sides. 20% go then after. 80% go in the medulla and 20% go in the spinal cord. So if the lesion is above the pyramidal decussation, you know there will be the contralateral weakness. There will be the contralateral weakness. There will be the weakness on the opposite sides because they cross and they supply the other side of the body. Clearly, similarly, if there is a lesion in spinal cord, lesion in spinal cord, clearly there will be ipsilateral weakness. Ipsilateral weakness. What do you mean by ipsilateral weakness? On the same side. On the same side, because from the anterior horn cells, when the fibers arise, they go to the same side of the body. They go to the same side of the body. So if there is a lesion in the spinal cord, clearly they will affect the same side of the body. That's called as the ipsilateral weakness. Ipsilateral weakness. So this was all about the tracts of the spinal cord. Keep revising. Thank you very much. I'll be back with another lecture.